this illustrious panel. To hear this illustrious panel talk about buyer brokering. So I want to welcome our 2023 President Charmaine Hickey, who is responsible for bringing us this. Well, when everybody gets through talking in the background anyway. So our education series is called Learn More to Earn More. So Charmaine, if you want to say a few words to us. She's coming to us remote from an installation in Panama City, Florida.
Hold on.
Now we can see.
We can hear you.
So I'm going to show you the room while they do their awards. Hold on, I'm running outside.
While we're waiting on Charmaine, I also want to welcome all of the 2023 leadership team and the 2024 leadership.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Alexis.
You have the stage.
Yes, hi everyone. Welcome. I am in Central Panhandle, and I just want to welcome you to Women Council Learn More, Earn More Education series. This is what we do. We provide free education to our members that will help them to learn more to grow their business. So I just want to thank you, Alexis and Catherine, for putting this together. And girls, have a fantastic session today. Sorry, I'm not there with you 24/7, but I am representing you all in the Central Panhandle. Bye now.
Bye-bye, Charmaine.
Okay.
So I would like to move forward to get into our program today. You are in for such a treat. We have 3 top producers from across the nation who've been doing buyer brokering for 20 plus years and are so comfortable with it. It's just like putting on their makeup in the morning. And so I'm excited that they're here to share with us. I'm going to introduce them and ask them to give us their 30-second elevator commercial on who they are and what they want us to know about them. I also want you to keep them in mind for referrals because they are awesome. So I want to start with Dawn Thomas from California.
Excuse me, Alexis, can I just say one thing before we get started?
Sure.
For those of you, the little tech tip, for those that don't know, we have a full house. Thank you all for being here, but we do have Alexis as moderator and 3 speakers. So if you want to make sure you see them up close and personal, go to the top right of your screen and click on view and change it to speaker view. And that'll bring the speaker to the forefront and you don't have to look through all the little squares. Okay? Sorry about that. I just want to clarify.
That's okay. The other thing too is if you have questions, put them in the chat because Catherine's going to moderate the chat for us. So Dawn, give us who you are, where we can find you and a little information.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and ladies of the Women's Council of Realtors for the state of Florida. My name is Dawn Thomas, and I serve the Silicon Valley Bay Area of California, where most of the tech companies were originally headquartered, as well as the beach communities of Santa Cruz. Price points and experience up to levels of 45 million. We do all different price points, and our goal is to help people that need to get somewhere. And I'm really pleased to be here with friends like Beth and Nancy and Alexis that I've known for years. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Nancy, tell us a little bit how cold it is in Vermont.
So it was 21 this morning and going to have a nice warm weekend at 37. So I live in Burlington, Vermont, and I'm at the northern border, not far from the Canadian border on Lake Champlain. And I've been in the business since 1981. And we started doing a lot of buyer brokering in the late 90s. So it's very common here. It's actually most of the way things are done, especially in Chittenden County, which is Burlington. I have a small independent company that is a family-run company. My 2 daughters are my listing agents, and I have 6 buyer specialists and 4 admin, and my husband is the inside the office man taking care of the back room. So we're small and we do a lot of transactions and a lot of great business, and really love working our real estate every day.
Wonderful. How about you, Beth, in Wisconsin?
Yes, well, and what? Thank you so much for having me. I work out of the Wauwatosa office of Shore West Realtors. Wauwatosa is the first ring suburb of Milwaukee, so I do service the metro Milwaukee area. Like Vermont, Wisconsin has had buyer agencies since the mid-90s, and it is most common here. I am fortunate, I sell a lot of real estate, and my business is pretty much 50-50 buyers, sellers. I sell 72 homes. It's often 36 or 38-34 buyers, sellers. And so I think that gives me a bit of an advantage because I know what each side is thinking.
Well, I just want to let you know that Beth doesn't have an assistant or a buyer's agent or anything. So she's pretty well organized and kind of knows how to get things done. I also want to point out, and I can't call you all out by name, but put the raise your hand in your window if you are a Star Power Star attending this. I heard Sandra Nickel was on board. So the reason for me mentioning that is these are the top of the top in the nation, these people, and yet they still have taken their time to join us to learn more. So I'm sure we have a lot of other people on here that have tons of experience and then some who don't have any. So we're going to try to give you some information that will help all of you. So I want to start out with how we approach buyer brokering with a buyer. So I'm a buyer, and let's say I just call in on a sign call and I say, Beth, I'm calling on your listing on Elm Street. I want to see it today at 2 o'clock. My name's Alexis.
I would say, oh, well, thank you so much for calling me, Alexis. That's a great house. Have you been looking at other homes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So are you working with an agent then?
Not really. I'm just calling the listing agents.
Okay. Have you signed a buyer brokerage agreement with any agent?
No, I haven't signed anything.
Oh, are you familiar with those?
I heard about it.
Okay, well, the way I work is I like to meet at the office. It won't take long, just a brief little meeting, then we'll go over to the house and take a look. Would 1 o'clock today work for you?
I don't want to come to the office. I just want to see the house.
Oh, I understand. I hear that a lot, but believe me, in today's world, there's so much to go over, including that buyer brokerage agreement, that we really need to meet just for a brief time at my office. So would 1 or would 2 be better?
Okay, so I'll come at 1 if we don't have to spend much time. So
Oh, I
I
promise. Won't be
wanted
long.
to point out to you how these ladies approach somebody that just calls them out of the blue. So Nancy, I want you to kind of say what you would say in that scenario, and then Dawn.
Well, thank you for calling in. I'm so happy that you chose to give us a buzz. I'm wondering, have you looked at other houses in our area?
Yes.
And are any of them ones that you'd be interested in today?
Well, we've got 2 on our short list.
Okay. And are you working with another realtor who showed you those houses?
Not really. They just showed me the house.
Well, in our market, it's very common to work with buyers on a buyer agency, and that's something I'm going to need to explain to you. So what we do is what's called a real estate 101, and take a little short time to explain about the paperwork and the procedures that are the legal basis in Vermont. And then we can scoot right over to the house afterwards. And I'm thinking that today would work for me probably about 4. Is that a good time for you? We could meet right at my office in South Burlington.
Okay. Now, Dawn, do the same for us. Just give us how you approach things, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Right. So thank you so much for calling in today, Alexis, about our listing. We're really proud to represent that particular property. Are you working currently with another agent?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay, so have you seen other houses in the neighborhood?
In the area, yes.
Okay, and have you just gone into the open houses, or how have you gotten in?
I just called the listing agent and they showed it to me.
Okay, all right. That certainly is a strategy. And what we like to do, and we do make the promise to our sellers, is that when we're bringing in clients that are not represented, that we make sure that they're actually, they've gone through a pre-approval process, or we have some sort of idea of how they're going to be paying for the property. Are you going to be requiring financing for this home purchase, or will you be paying cash?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay, all right. So what I'd like to do though is meet with you ahead of time. We can meet at a coffee shop or in my office, whichever is more important to you. But we do have, documents that I need you to review and I need to explain to you. One is called the buyer representation agreement. Are you familiar with that?
I heard about it.
Okay. And that is something that is more prominent in today's market. I'd love to meet with you to discuss this and show you how we can help you and show you properties that may not even be available to the open market just yet. Can you meet today at 1 or 3?
Let's do 3.
Okay, perfect. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so
All right.
much.
So here's the main thing. All 3 of these ladies work different markets, and what you hear is something very similar from each of them. The main thing is to get the buyer to understand the buyer representation in the first place and how your state allows you to work with buyers. I know in Florida, we're transaction brokers. We can be single agents. A lot of this stuff is going to change, I feel, based on the outcome of the lawsuit with NAR and whoever else they're suing across the nation. So the purpose of our meeting today is to kind of get people ready for it. And so the first step is to have that first meeting, as the ladies were saying, with the buyer to explain it. Now, I would like you, let's say we've got our appointment now, and just give me a kind of a short rundown and you had some good talking points, Dawn, on just basically just take a minute to explain to me, why I should work with you and not call all the listing agents.
Right. And that's really a great question, Alexis. And I think that, it might be, construed, and I'm not saying that this is what you're after, but it might be construed that you may get a better deal if you work with a listing agent, or there might be something, more beneficial. I mean, really the fact of the matter is that the sellers have hired myself and my team and my brokerage to represent them in the sale of this home. So if we were to represent you, which we would not do on this particular property, because we don't do what's called double ending our properties, you would actually have, what I consider to be a conflict of interest. Now, that doesn't mean we won't show you the property. Certainly, we want to make sure you get in and see it if it's something that really matches your needs. And in the case that if you do move forward with, an offer on this particular property, we would refer you to somebody else that is.
All right, so let me interrupt you, Dawn. Right now in Florida, we don't do that. We're a transaction broker. So let's just assume you can show me your listing. And even if it's somebody else's listing, let's just go from there so that you can explain, why is it beneficial to me to work with you as a buyer broker?
Right. So, first things first is, we represent your needs and your interests, and that comes first and foremost. And we will show you properties that are both available on the market, on, things that you can see automatically, as well as properties that are not yet on the open market. In other words, they're coming soon listings that we have access to through a variety of different networks that we're part of. We also have, top skills in negotiation, and I'll go into that. We have Harvard Law School program and negotiation certification, and, our market knowledge, and, our commitment to finding you the right home. You'll never hear from us that, this is a property you need to buy because you've looked at, 30 of them and, this one's going to move fast. If it's not right for you, we're not going to pressure you into buying. And we're going to be your advocate, and especially having the buyer representation agreement in place. We're going to be your advocate, in all powerful negotiations, some things that you may not even think of that come up in the process of the offer process, as well as throughout the escrow, when things like repairs come up, so on and so forth. Do these things sound good to you, Alexis?
Yeah, it does, because I want to be represented. So,
Okay.
so Beth, I'm going to ask you to do the same. Tell me why I need to be represented. I can't speak. And then what's the benefit of doing business with your team? How do you approach that?
Well, as you know, I am my team. The advantage really of signing a buyer brokerage agreement with myself is that you are hiring me to help you find and negotiate the purchase and represent you as the client, Alexis. That means I can give you advice, opinion, and counsel. You don't need to follow it if you don't want to, but you're going to get the benefit and the knowledge that I've gained in over 30 years of selling real estate here. So as a buyer broker, I can show you anything that's listed, and I can also show you homes that aren't listed. In this tight inventory market, sometimes the perfect home isn't on the open market. And I've had to get creative for some of my buyer clients. Perhaps if you're looking for a condo, or you're looking in a specific subdivision or neighborhood, I'm going to go through the tax records. I'm going to find properties that match what you're looking for and send letters to those sellers. And maybe we'll find something off market, or I'll network with agents that sell a lot of property in the area that you're looking, and find something. Then once we find it, I can write the offer for you and represent you in that negotiation and throughout. If we have an appraisal issue, if we have an inspection issue, don't you want an advocate who is working for you, or would you prefer to just have someone who's just filling out the paperwork?
No, I want somebody to represent me. So Nancy, tell me how you would approach that with explaining why I need to have a buyer broker.
Well, Alexis, it's interesting in our market, which today is a hot market. It's very different than when it was slow, but both markets really required you have someone on your side. It's an intricate process of finding the right home, finding homes that are on the market, homes that are not on the market, different negotiating tactics that we use. So our goal is to always have your best interests at the forefront. Sometimes we have to have hard conversations because it may be a bidding war. You may need to do some things on your end that you may not want to do. But if we're knowing that we're working together, always to get you what you're looking for, then you can have faith that the things that we're doing, you're agreeing to, and everything's upfront going as you would have it be directed. And things get complicated. We end up with title issues, appraisal issues. Human beings are the difficult part of real estate, not the real estate. And so we have to thread our way through all of that, and having someone on your side, explaining how it's going, so you're not waking up in the morning worrying, what am I supposed to do next? We're always there guiding you so that from start to finish, we're in your corner, we represent you, you are our client, and it always stays that way from start to the finish. And on after the closing, we're still there with you.
At this point, Catherine, do we have any questions along these lines in the chat group that we could get answered? Or if not, I'll move on to
We've
the next
had a
question.
few, and Dawn has been very good about answering them on the chat. Somebody said, what if your office is far from the property? It says you can always meet in a coffee shop. And then Beth responded that our area is very competitive and deals can be lost in a coffee shop. It only takes a few minutes. And if they absolutely refuse, she brings the buyer packet with all the info to the showing. Good tip. How do you proceed if the buyer refuses to meet with them? An answer on that is blame it on the broker. The broker requires that you meet at the office. With the driver's license in today's world, that's a really good safeguard. Anyway, and then this is a real important question. Can Florida transaction agents say the same thing, these things when they're not single agents? and they don't represent, and Beth answered this, said, no, you are not representing a buyer as a transaction agent. You can only represent the buyer's best interest if you have an agreement signed to do so, meaning single agency.
Let me tackle that for a moment, being a Florida Realtor. So we have all these forms available in Form Simplicity right now. You have a buyer broker agreement. You can represent the buyer or the seller right now in Florida as a single agent. All you have to do is get the paperwork signed and notify the listing agent, if you're a single agent with the buyer, that you represent the buyer prior to showing the house. So when you call Catherine to make the appointment, I say, Catherine, this is Alexis with Keller Williams. I need to show your listing on Elm Street this afternoon at 2. I just want to let you know that I'm working with Beth as a single agent representing the buyer only. Right? And we can do that right now in the state of Florida. That's a choice. And there is a buyer broker agreement available in our documents right now. A lot of people work as a transaction broker, like I do, but then if you want to work as a single agent and that buyer wants to see one of your company's listings, we have a form that you can transition to a transaction broker that you need to get signed with the buyer right now today, if you're going to work with the buyer as a single agent representative. So that's already allowed in Florida. You just sign a single agent agreement and then you sign the buyer broker agreement. So I'm not an attorney, let's say that. I'm not your broker. You know, I've had a broker's license for 43 years now, older than most of you on this call. But I'm saying check with your broker after I've said all that stuff. So let's just go on with compensation, which is really the biggest issue and going to be the big issue, you know, coming up. This is what all this supposed lawsuits about, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about how we get paid. I don't want you to give me a dollar amount, a percentage, or whatever. For purposes of what we're doing here today, we're going to talk about earning some apples when we sell the buyer a house. So Beth, you're going over your buyer broker agreement with me. And so now tell me how you get paid.
Yes, well, this is an employment contract, Alexis. So you'll see on the very first page of our agreement, it does spell out how I will get paid. Now, there are some properties that are listed and are in the multiple listing service, and there is what they call an offer of compensation to a buyer's agent. Okay, in that case, that means that there's already an offer to be paid right there. However, you will see that it does say that you are going to pay X amount of apples to Shore West Realtors if I find a property for you that is not listed or is not offering a compensation. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I've never paid a compensation before. So you're saying I need to pay you 3 apples, but what if the house I like is only paying 1 apple?
Then we will figure out how you're going to be paying the 2 apples. So you will always know when we go to look at a house if the compensation has already been offered to be paid. So that means that when you're making your offer, you're actually kind of paying it, right? But that the compensation is there. Or if we have to negotiate that, I have had some buyers who prefer to have a pure representation, and they will actually bring the compensation to closing and a cashier's check. That's another option you have.
Okay, Dawn, tell me how you're going to get compensated in this. What's it going to cost me?
So what our broker cooperating compensation is advertised in the multiple listing service, and that can be anywhere from 4 apples all the way to a flat fee, Alexis. And when we have buyer representation agreement, I get paid the same. And so it doesn't matter which property we show you. Again, I've already mentioned to you, we would show you things that are not yet available to the open market. We have a great reputation in town. If you do decide to submit an offer, it's pretty well likely you're going to get it.
That's usually how.
I know, and sorry,
Whoever's
my,
talking, please mute yourself.
my flashlight is on. Turn this off real quick.
I think that's Marcia. Marcia, can you please mute yourself? Thanks. So the way this works is, however many apples are in our buyer representation agreement, the way the agreement works is if there is a broker cooperating compensation, advertising the multiple listing service, that gets credited. So you're not responsible for that fee no matter what, because in most cases, or, sometimes maybe not, the seller may be paying, a certain amount of apples that we've already agreed upon. Does that sound good to you?
Well, yeah, as long as I don't have to bring any money.
Well,
So,
there may be a case though, in at any time, if you bring a property to our attention or we bring it to your attention, I will definitely let you know this is what the cooperating compensation is ahead of time. If it's 2 apples, then you and I can discuss how that last apple is going to be handled, right? We can potentially offer, I can go to the listing.
hold on that thought for me for a minute, Dawn. I want to get into that next. Nancy, I want to hear from you on how you're going to get paid.
Alexis, one of the things that I want to bring up is that a question for you in your regular transaction where there's money already in it for the agent bringing the buyer, you wouldn't have to bring any money. But at that point, it's also built in so that when you buy that house, you're actually paying for your mortgage for that total. So you are allowed to take the money and pay it with cash instead. It's going to lower your closing costs and it's going to lower the sales price. So you don't have to have a mortgage on the sales commission. So at this point, it's your choice to either bring it as cash or we can work it into the transaction. So you and I look at the total price you want to pay, which would include the fee. And then that would be the amount we'd want to make as the offer. So it's always your choice to either pay it outside, which a lot of people do, if they have the ability to do that because it saves you money, or you can embed it and mortgage it. So what we pay is right here is all pre-typed already on our form. There's a certain amount for residential and another amount for land and another amount for commercial. So that's what we charge. And if there's a house we find that has nothing, then that would be the amount. And if there's something offered, then we adjust it. You and I talk about it when we make the offer, so there's no surprises.
All right. And so what if I'm a VA buyer and VA says I can't pay the fee? Now I want to get into different ways we can structure our offer so the fee is paid on my behalf to you, and I'm not bringing money to closing in any shape, form, or fashion. So since I have you on, Nancy, speak about I'm a VA buyer, and now how could you structure the offer I want to make so you get paid?
The VA does not allow anyone to charge the veteran a fee. So there cannot be a fee the same way I just explained it. To that veteran, I'm going to have to explain that unless it's embedded in the price, then that would probably preclude them going down a path of that somebody wouldn't. So let's assume we have an unrepresented seller, Alexis, and you're a veteran. And I'm going to say to you, well, here, we're going to make this offer to our unrepresented seller, and he wants 500,000. So we're going to structure your offer so that the seller, purely as a convenience of this transaction, contributes back X amount of dollars as a convenience to Nancy Jenkins Real Estate. So whatever the fee you and I agree on, that would be included with the seller contributing it back. So the seller's net will actually be a little bit below what they would read on the contract. And that's going to be important that you're working with me so I can explain that to the seller if they're independent, or explain it to the realtor. If we were in another transaction with a realtor, I need to be able to explain that to them. So that's how that would come back. So you're not actually ever going to have to pay the fee as a veteran. It always has to be embedded.
All right, give me your thought on the veteran paying the fee, Beth.
Well, it's pretty much what Nancy said. I ran into this a couple years ago. And there is specific language that needs to be in the offer that we will get from your loan officer, Alexis, if we are in that situation. And so in the offer, we will address that and have the seller provide as an incentive for you to purchase whatever the fee is that we have agreed to on the buyer brokerage. So the VA just does not allow you to bring it separately. So we are kind of limited in what we can do, and that is the way to do it.
All right, now I want to say this, those suggestions can work whether you're VA or not, period. Those are
Right.
things that you can always do for any buyer. And so there's some things in the chat that we want to get answered here, but I want to go to Dawn about your thoughts on, you know, again, I'm a veteran, and how are you going to get paid?
So, full disclosure, we don't really work on a lot of VA loans in our area. Excuse me, the price points are pretty high.
So then just talk about, I don't want to bring the fee. Let's just go there. I don't want to
Sure.
bring the fee. I don't want to write a check. I don't want to bring the fee. So tell me how you can get the compensation.
So what we can do, Alexis, as one mode of strategy is I can, send the listing agent ahead of time before your offer is sent a proposal on cooperating broker compensation. I would call them and just say, here's where my client stands. They're very well qualified to purchase this home. You'll have no problems. It'll be a very smooth transaction. However, they want to, have the seller, pay the professional fee. We can negotiate off the price. There's a lot of different things we can negotiate on. But to make up for how many apples are in our buyer representation agreement that you and I have agreed upon. Does that sound okay to you?
Yes, as long as you can work it in the deal and I'm not paying cash. I want to go back up to a question in the chat I just saw from Christine Citrano, who is a past president of Florida Women's Council, woohoo. So Christine said, how would they, Nancy, in fact, roll that into their mortgage, that when most lenders told me that the sales commission cannot be incorporated into the mortgage?
It can be incorporated as a closing cost. The banks don't recognize paying commissions. I think that will change possibly after all these lawsuits where both the VA and the banks are going to have to rearrange how they think about it. They structured their model based on seller compensation of a co-broke. That's where these rules came from. So what we do is you embed it into closing costs. So it's coming back either to the buyer, so the money can come back to the buyer and then the buyer pays us, or it can come back to the company. You just have to check in with whichever mortgage company or bank you're working with. As you get pre-qualified, that's one of the conversations you're going to have with their lender to make sure that you can structure it and how they want it structured. One of the more important reasons for that buyer intro is to discuss, are they paying cash? Do they have to have a mortgage? Who are they going to be pre-qualified with? And in our area, it makes a lot of difference if they're pre-qualified with a local lender. Local lenders have a lot more latitude and can work with us on things like this. If they are in some of the great big rubber stamp Bank of America kind of things, then you usually have to use a closing cost conversation.
Okay. Missy McDonald said, if you add to price for VA, then it has to appraise. So Missy, in a bidding war, when they're bidding the price up, it's no different. It still has to appraise. So it doesn't matter if it's a veteran or anybody, it's still got to appraise. So Beth, you have your hand up. You want to address that?
Well, interestingly enough, it's a myth out there that a VA buyer cannot make up an appraisal shortfall. They can. So if they have the cash and the house does not appraise, they can pay the difference.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same deal as if we got 6 offers on the property and everybody's bidding up the price and the seller takes a price that's 15,000 over asking price. You always suffer the issue of, is it going to appraise? And it's not going to be any different with the veteran buyer. than it's going to be with anybody else. Nancy, you wanted to say something?
In our market, because it's competitive, we have most of the offers that go in if they're competing or they're above with a clause that says the buyer will make up any difference, and they remove the appraisal contingency so they have a better shot of getting their offer accepted. Obviously, if you can't do that, then you wouldn't do it. But if you can, they remove the limit on the appraisal that it must appraise. And the buyer states in an addendum that they will make up the difference from X or just in general. But usually there's an amount that they'll make up the difference.
All
You
right,
can
so
use
here,
that thing.
here's a
for-
question from Nancy, which is still going back to this. So is it legal to ask the buyer, would you like me to limit my showings to only homes with the sellers offering compensation?
Yes.
I think it's perfectly legal to ask them because you represent them. And they don't have to look at every home that pops up that meets their description. So Beth, you're shaking your head, yes, so answer that.
I'm shaking my
I've
head.
had buyers ask me that more than once, and they're like, I understand what you're saying. We can build it in, we can pay the difference, and they're like, but can we just try in the beginning to keep it simple and just look at homes where the compensation is offered that matches? And I say, if you're comfortable with that, and I've had a few buyers who say that, they just don't want to mess around with it. Obviously, we've been able to find them something in a shorter period of time. If not, we would revisit that conversation and go over all the different options that there are. But they are your employer. That's what I tell them. You are signing an employment contract with me. You're hiring me. So we're going to work out the terms of employment. And if that's what you really want, after I've explained to you the pros and cons of it, that's your choice as a buyer, Alexis.
Yeah, and rightly so. And it's up to us, I think, to have the sit down, as the ladies were saying, prior to doing this, because the more education the consumer gets up front, the better off we are. Most of our issues come up when they don't understand. Or I will say sometimes, in all honesty, you've explained it correctly, but they're not listening, they don't get it, and you have to remind them of what you discussed. So having the written agreement really is like the roadmap. And you can always refer back to them and say, remember now in paragraph 4 here, you initialed this and we discussed it. And then they go, oh, I forgot about that. That takes care of all the angst and you didn't do this and you were supposed to do that and, whatever. It's all about the education. And in part of the education, I'm going to ask Catherine if she will post the link. These ladies have been gracious to give us all their buyer broker documents. Now, again, I'm going to say to you, these are from different states. Share these with your broker. Do not go out and take their name off and put your name on and run around and use these documents, right? Because, first of all, even though they may be perfectly okay with your attorney saying the language is great, your broker may not like that. But this is to give you an example of how they're working right now and very successfully with clients in different areas and what their agreements say. It's an opportunity for you to learn. And the other thing I find with this is if I'm going to do this in Florida and I have a buyer who's given a little bit of pushback, then I say, well, you know what? I got 3 friends who are top producers around the nation. They're doing it in their states too. It's not just here that we're doing this. So use it however you want for educational purposes only, not to be your new buyer broker forms. So having said that, that gets me out of jail here, I think, for 2 minutes. Nancy wanted to say something.
Yeah, I want to say something because really one of the things that you're getting is just an objection. When they say, well, I just want to see houses that is embedded, that's just an objection. So you want to work with any objection by getting to the root of it. So the first question is, if they don't have the ability to do anything but that, then you're going to explain how limited they're going to be, that they can only see things that are embedded. But most people do have the ability to pay on their own. And you just have to get around what it is. And honestly, I rarely ever, I can't remember a buyer saying that to me. So, and it's been years. One of our biggest things was overcoming the realtors' anxiety about bringing up getting paid. So your plumber tells you what they're going to charge. Everybody tells you what they're going to charge. I don't know why realtors feel, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to tell somebody what I'm going to charge. So your time is valuable and your knowledge is valuable. And the other piece of it, that as you look at this objection, you want to let them know that if they only see what is embedded already in the MLS, they're going to miss probably the perfect house that may be listed by owner or not even listed yet. So you want to overcome the objection with reality and make sure you're not the source of the problem.
I want to mention here before I call on Dawn, who's been patiently waiting, that what about the builder? What am I trying to say? Houses. I can't get it out today.
Construction.
The builder inventory, right? When they go on site and they work with the builder's rep, they're working with the seller's agent, period. And so you need to make sure you include in your conversation your
Yes.
builders, that you can represent them in the new build, because if they go to the site and they buy from the agent in today's world in Pensacola, they're basically an employee of the builder. They're not just an MLS agent out there. Now, that's not to say that you won't find an MLS agent sitting out there who is giving the builder's rep a break for a day. But typically, if I go to a builder's site, it is the builder's employee who may also be a licensed realtor sitting there with the inventory. Ms. Dawn, you had some
Yes.
things you wanted to tell us.
Yes, I wanted to piggyback on what Nancy just said. Which would be expected. We're dealing with a lot of objections from the attendees of this webinar. And I get that. And I love objections personally. And I know all four of us do on this panel. You would never put a sign in front of a yard without a listing agreement signed. Okay, that is, as Beth said, that's an employment contract for you to, prepare, list, market, sell, negotiate the whole 9 yards of a client's property. Why would you work with a buyer, especially in today's, environment, where you have a chance of getting paid zero apples? Why would you put all that work into it without, having yourself protected? The other thing I wanted to mention is that I'd really love to see our industry, leave the commission world, the commission word, and change it to professional fee when we're talking to the public, because everybody knows who's commissioned. Just name an industry that's not well looked upon. It's a professional fee. You all are very well trained. You know how to negotiate. You're advocates of your clients. You want the best for them. You're a professional. So that's just the 2 points I wanted to make. Thank you.
That's a pearl. That's a pearl.
Along those lines, I have said this forever, and I'll share it again. These girls have heard it enough to, not want to hear it again. And when I'm working with buyers, I get paid for what I know and for what I know how to do. So my agreements already say professional fee. The listing agreement says professional fee. Buyer broker agreement says professional fee. I tell them a commission is what you pay to Sotheby's when they sell your Rembrandt for you. And so I don't work the same way as Sotheby's do. They have a big auction and, try to get you the most money. But I get paid for what I know and what I know how to do. And if you can take what you know and put it with who you know, because I know a lot of people, then I'm able to accomplish a little bit more than others can accomplish. So I think you want to put that kind of language into your scripts book. And as Dawn suggested, start using the word professional fee. Go to your broker, see if you can take the word commission out of your buyer broker agreement. Because in the world of Florida, we are not required to use any of the forms that are available to us on Form Simplicity. In the state of Florida, as of now, as far as I know, the broker can determine what contract is used You can have your own brokerage contract. You can have your own buyer broker agreement contract, your own listing contract that your broker and the broker's attorney decide to put together. In fact, we still have Naples and Jacksonville area in Florida, NEFAR, that have their own forms. They don't use any of the forms. They don't use the FAR bar contract that I'm aware of and so forth. So understand that if it's not available on Form Simplicity, go to your broker and say, can you and your attorney get together and fix this up a contract here? But I would suggest using the word professional fee. I have Kelly who still wants an answer to, how would you proceed if the buyer refuses to meet with you and they still say they want to see the house? Would you do a one-time showing with them, for example? And Beth, how would you approach that?
Well, I had briefly typed an answer there. You know, I would still push for it if there is absolutely no way. I would obviously pre-qualify them, you know, are you pre-approved? Are you paying cash? You know, get into some more questions as far as making sure they really are a valid buyer after going through the security reasons, the reason my brokerage wants us to meet, besides the fact that it is kind of a complicated thing to buy a house nowadays, not as easy as it used to be. Our offer to purchase, you know, is 10 pages. We have a 4-page standard addendum. We have another 3 addendums at 2 pages each, which often accompany the offer, plus a lead-based paint addendum and a condition report. So just to go over the paperwork, it's beneficial for us to meet briefly. Of course, this is real world. I've been selling for over 30 years. So yes, I have gone out occasionally when it just does not work for us to meet in the office ahead of time. And in that situation, as I mentioned, I bring along the whole buyer packet with me. So it's got a copy of our state of Wisconsin offer to purchase in the addendums. It's got a copy of our buyer broker agreement. It's got a copy of our buyer agency disclosure. It's got a flyer that I've included that they will have uploaded on what the difference is in Wisconsin, working with a seller's agent versus a buyer's agent. So I would encourage you, if your companies don't have a flyer as to why sign a buyer agency agreement, your next office meeting, brainstorm it up, get your marketing department to put it together. And so I go over all of that at the house then with them and do a mini in-person appointment at the actual property. So we will be covering this information, whether we are at the office or we are at the property, and they will be getting the same things, both emailed to them and paper copy.
How about you, Dawn?
So, you know, no, I don't go out unless they, you know, come and meet with us individually, you know, or some sort of consultation, even if it's on Zoom. I just need to meet with them. I need to go through the process, the objections and everything else. And the other thing too is I've already mentioned that we don't double end our properties. And so the sellers want us to represent them, just as if we are representing buyers, the buyers want us to represent just them. I also placed in the notes on the chat that, you know, if you're out there, and I think it was, I'm sorry, the young lady, Monty, I think was her last name. She said, you know, she blames it on the broker. You get a copy of their driver's license and everything else. I think that we have to be very, you know, concerned about safety, just going out randomly showing properties with people we don't know. So that's the way we handle it.
How about you, Nancy?
I call it on the hood of the car. I bring the presentation with me, and we have a thing that we're using called Forewarn. I don't know if you have it. You can plug the person. So I think one of the big reasons that we try not to do it is you don't know who the person is. So if you're going to go meet someone, take all the security precautions, check Forewarn, but bring your packet with you. In Vermont, you have to have them sign a disclosure before you do anything. And so that's my reason to start with here's what we're going to talk about. And then I broaden it into talking about the buyer broker and representation. And so we would, you know, the roof of the car, on the porch of the house. It's important to have that meeting, because otherwise you're like, cab driver. You drive them, you walk over, open the door, they leave, thank you very much. And that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
So in Florida right now, we have a non-rep form, a non-representation form that you could just say, okay, I'll agree to meet you at this one house on Elm Street, and then explain your buyer broker information. If they choose not to sign that, pop out your non-representative form and have them sign it. And because it says this is to notify you that I don't represent you in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So if nothing else, if they, get in a wad over, you showed them the house, you told them something, whatever, as people do, you have a form saying that they understood that, you don't represent them in any shape, form, or fashion. So I would at least get the non-rep form signed. If they don't want to sign a buyer broker agreement and you don't want to represent them as a transaction broker, then go ahead and get the non-rep signed. Dawn?
Really quickly on the last point. The other thing that I would also mention to somebody who's just calling up randomly is that, there is a thing where, if it's our listing, we show them the property, they're unrepresented and they write with somebody else. It's implied agency and we can go after that other person's apples, the other realtor's apples. And so, and I do explain that. I forgot to mention that, I apologize, but I do explain that to this person. And, and just like anybody else, like we've all asked, have you seen properties before? How many have you seen? Do you have a realtor you're working with, so on and so forth, depending on how they answer that by the other, buyer who might be representing them on our listing. They probably wouldn't want to touch them with a 10-foot pole either, because they know that we've already physically shown the property.
The other thing that we made up many years ago because of this stuff is we have a form that we ask them to sign that says they're not working with another agent, and they understand that if they decide to make an offer on this house, they're agreeing to go through us to make the offer. And, so any way that you can protect yourself in that form, I would suggest you do, whether you're doing buyer brokering or not, whatever you're doing, stuff like that works. I want to bring up something that was put in the chat by Rory Dubin, who is, Rory, I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong. You're on the board with NEFAR, which is Northeast Florida, which is Jacksonville that I brought up, has their own forms, and you're going to be president, I think, in 2024. But he said, actually, NEFAR members use NEFAR forms strictly where both parties are members of NEFAR. And if they're not, then they commonly use Florida Realtors contracts on many transactions. So
that's correct on all counts.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that for me there, Rory. And again, just an example of somebody who has more education than anybody on the planet joining us on this session today. So hopefully you're getting something out of this. I saw that Catherine did post that along with the recording within 24 hours, you're going to get a link to be able to get to all these forms that our great panelists are using. Another question we need to take up here, and I forgot who asked it. So let's go back to the buyer broker agreement, Beth, and you, in your agreement, it says you get 3 apples, all right? But I'd like to negotiate to only pay you 2 apples. How do you handle that? Someone say, Beth, I really like you. I'd like to sign an agreement with you. I don't like 2 apples, but 3 apples, but I'd rather do 2 apples.
Well, I've got to say, Alexis, I guess I'm a little confused. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, I heard everything's negotiable and everybody says you should negotiate. So I want to negotiate.
Well, I love that attitude and I love to negotiate, and that's why the answer is no. I can promise you that I will be negotiating on your behalf if you sign this, and that it will be well worth the 3 apples.
All right. So Nancy, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to go back a minute to all those forms that you were discussing. So when you think about should you meet and talk to the people before you go in the house, you listed like two different forms, the disclosure form and the non-transaction form. So you do have to do this in Florida. You have to, our disclosure form is that non-transaction form that nobody represents them. So you do have to stop a minute before you go show them the house to discuss those. So you might as well discuss a deeper subject once you're there, because those prompt the discussion about buyer brokering. It's a
Yes.
perfect opening to go
But
straight to buyer brokering.
we don't have to do that. You know, we could show the house as a transaction broker, represent the transaction and not represent them. There was a period in time in Florida when we had to have the non-rep signed. However, if I decide, you know, you're just being a little bit too cocky here, Nancy, and I'm not sure if I want to represent you at all. I want to meet you and I want to learn a little bit about you, and maybe you and I can work together. I'm going to go over that buyer broker agreement information with you. And then if I still don't feel comfortable with you, whether you feel comfortable with me or not, I'm going to pop that non-rep to you and say, before we see the house, you have to sign this. I just wanted to make sure that our Florida members, or anybody for that matter of fact, have the right to have forms like that. Because if you don't want to represent them in any way, shape, form, or fashion, I think all states would give you the right to not represent them. But again, I'm not the lawyer. I'm just simply saying, look into it and see what's allowed in your state. It's amazing when you are moving away from them, how they are leaning into you. The more you back up, the more they want to pull forward. And so sometimes that's all it takes to get them off the fence, to you know, get them going. So I want to hear, Nancy, your thought on, I want to negotiate your apples.
Well, Alexis, this is just like when we're speaking with the seller. Everything is negotiable. And what I have done is put together a compensation package that is what we look for in our office. And what I'm going to recommend we do is we start out with the fee that's written down here for our professional services. And if there's a time that we're going to have to discuss it, it's not now. It may be in the moment of writing an offer or in the moment of negotiating something. But as long as we're going to just start out all together up front, let's start out correctly. And I'm not saying there's no room for movement later, but generally speaking, there's no need for movement. So let's start out this way and then we'll take it step by step.
All right, how about you, Dawn?
Yeah, so Alexis, I appreciate you asking that question. So I have a question for you. Is it okay that I ask that? You know what I
Sure.
have? Okay,
Absolutely.
great. So is it important to you that whomever is representing you professionally has the power to negotiate very well, is not afraid of conflict? And what I mean by that is after we're in escrow with a potential seller, they'll actually go back to the seller if we find something wrong through our inspection process, and we'll look after your wishes and you know, be your advocate all the way through, you know, 100%. Is that important to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, for all of our clients and for everybody we work with, they pay us, you know, X apples. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, our service is unmatched. We want to make sure you're happy. And, you know, since our you know, our goals are aligned, you know, we're here, you know, I have the paperwork right in front of us. Let's just do it. If you're not happy, I will, you know, we can reevaluate and we, you know, we'll just have it, you know, canceled and you can move on. Does that sound good to you?
Mm-hmm. It does.
Okay, great.
Another thing, again, going back to wanting to negotiate, you know, I would generally say to the buyer, well, right now we're expecting compensation from the seller side.
Yeah.
And another thing I want you to think about, Dawn, when you work with me, I'm not charging you anything until we find the house that you want to buy. We negotiate the best price possible for you and get you to closing. And then and only then do you pay me something. So consider right now I'm working for zero. Because I'm not asking you, I'm not asking you to pay me any apples or any type of compensation up front. All my services are free until we get to the closing table with the house that you love, you want to buy at a price you're happy with. And then and only then will you have to come up with a professional fee if it's not provided on the selling side of the deal. How does that sound? And
Perfect.
generally, when I explain to them that they're not paying me a nickel, I'm taking a chance on them, like, you know, more so than they are on me. Generally, they want to sign it. So let's go back to Forewarned. Thank you, Linda Swanson. She put in the chat, Forewarned is an app that you can get and you have to pay for it. And so what it does is it allows you to type in a name and it will give you background on them. So I'm sure if I type in Rory Dubin, it's going to tell me all about all the education he's got and all his designations and what he teaches and what boards he serves on, but it's not going to tell me that he is a criminal. Okay. So I learned about this app, quite frankly, from a past president of Florida RRC, who happens to be a single lady. And I asked her the question, my God, isn't it scary out in the dating world nowadays being online? And she said, well, I just run them through Forewarned. And I went, what is that? So what you want to do with buyers and sellers. So when somebody calls you even to list a house, you want to run their name through there just to make sure that you're not walking into a home with Jack the Ripper. That, you know, we're talking about meeting buyers and that's scary, but let me tell you something, folks, you know, realtors have gone on listing appointments only to be found in the closet later dead. So in today's world, I would download that app, and Linda says we're going to get a discount in January. So here in a few weeks, you'll be able to do that here in Florida. What else do we have that looked important that I have scrolled by? Did y'all see any? I can't
Here's
think.
a good
straight.
one, Alexis. What if a buyer comes to my open house first without an agent and there's no buyer broker agreement? Does the agent have the right to tell me to cease contacting the buyers?
All right, so in that scenario, I'm going to assume that they came to the open house unaccompanied, unrepresented. Then
What it
went
sounds
out,
like.
then went out and found an agent and signed a buyer broker agreement and decided to write an offer on that listing. So with that in mind, Nancy's waving her hand. So go ahead, Nancy.
We've been doing this so long that we evolved this open house situation where we now ask if they already have a buyer client relationship with someone at the open house, and agents can call into the agent at the open house and just say, my person is coming. But you have to remember that the consumers are not part of the real estate club that we belong to. They don't know the rules. And as your code of ethics, you want to do the right thing for the people. If the person really is wanting representation, you don't want to, as the seller's rep at the open house, not allow representation because they went to your open house. Representation does not equal compensation. So if you don't want to share your listing fee with another agent, that's just clearly what you would tell them. But I think that's short-sighted. In the long run, this buyer brokering thing is probably going to come your way, and it's better to be cooperative. So we ask a lot of questions of the person, you know, and they will often say, oh yes, well, I do have someone that if I like the house, they're going to write it up. They don't announce that because your sign says open house, which leads a consumer to believe they can just come in. They don't think there's rules attached to them. They don't think that they just got a bounty on their head because they walked in. So you need to be clear about that when they come to your open house and don't negate their ability to have representation. And if you want to take the hard stand that you don't share it, representation does not equal compensation. I hope that's not complicated.
Thank you, Nancy. Beth?
Well, I mean, I completely agree. I don't know what type of market this person is in. You know, in our market, what comes around goes around. I've had it go both ways, you know, where someone comes in, is at the open house, half an hour, asking a million questions, maybe even emails me, right? After the open house with questions. And all of a sudden they have an agent. And guess what? I want that house sold. I'm like, go for it, you know? And then I've had the same situation. I've had, you know, where a buyer totally went off the rails, right? And we have procuring clause, obviously here, and the listing agent or even the agent from their team or office who was holding the open house could have said, hey, no, we are procuring clause. We are seeing this through. They were like, oh, Beth, you know, buyers don't know what they're doing, right? You know, go for it. But we have an honest heart to heart. And I do truly believe that what comes around goes around. But you do need to be vigilant in asking the questions because the consumer does not understand. When you say, are you working with someone? They'll say no, even though they've been working with someone for 2 months, right? In their mind, they're not working. That agent's helping them, or, you know, who knows? So you have to say, have you seen other houses with an agent? Have you signed an agreement with an agent? You have to be really specific. And even then, they may end up leaving your open house and deciding that, you know, their neighbor's cousin Joe is the perfect agent to represent them. Well, if it gets your listing sold, I'd say go for it. You know, you're there at the open house to get an offer for your seller. You're not there to quibble with other agents and buyers. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Beth. Dawn? We can't hear you. You're muted, Dawn.
Muted myself.
Okay.
I agree with Beth and Nancy wholeheartedly. There is various different verbiage that we can all use at an open house. And, you know, when somebody walks in, they start talking with you and, you know, for the most part, we're very personable, you know, and you do hit it off with people because, you know, people who are friendly like other nice people, but, you know, ask them, you know, like Beth said, are you working with an agent? Have you signed an agreement? You know, well, I'm working with somebody. Oh, really? Who is that? Who is the person? I'd love to let them know you're in my open house. If they don't know that person's name, then I know that they're not working with somebody. And what that is that's blow away dialogue. I know that right off the bat. So, you know, then, you know, okay, so this person, have you signed an agreement with them? I still go down all of the questions like Beth said. At the end of our conversation, you know, we have other people coming in, looking at the house. You know, I'll try to set an appointment with them right then and there. And at the end of the day, if they do say they are working with another agent, great. For updates on this house or other things I might see in the marketplace, would you like me to contact your agent to let them know? Or would you like me to contact you? And if they say, oh, just call me directly, then again, they're not specifically working with somebody else. But as Beth said, I am representing the seller. I'm not there to necessarily pick up more buyers. If anything, I want to pick up more listings out of open house. And it is a small community, you know, even though we have 30-something thousand agents in our area, it is still a small community and word gets around.
I agree with everything you ladies said. I'm with Beth. I don't want to really start a war because, you know, I might have a buyer for that agent's listing in the future and it might cost that buyer getting the property. It's not worth it to me to fight with somebody over that. I agree that when you post an open house, you're asking the whole world to come in, even the neighbors who aren't going to buy the house. I have no intentions of purchasing anything. And that's a risk you take when you hold the open house. I'm pretty diligent. You know, our open house questions, as Dawn alluded to, ask them if they're working with another agent that they want to get credit for the sale. You know, if you like this house and decide to purchase it, or another question would be, if you like this house, decide to purchase it, do you have an agent in mind that you'd want to write the offer with? Because I'd like to call them and see if they're available to come over right now and look at it with you. I mean, there's all kinds of approaches that you can do, but in the end, if that agent finds, if that buyer finds another agent for whatever reason and signs a buyer broker agreement, then you need to back off, is my opinion, and let it process. Now, let's say they don't sign a buyer broker agreement. That could be a horse of another color. They're not signed a buyer broker agreement. You just got an offer in here from someone who's never even seen the house. I mean, you know if they made an appointment or not. So I have an open house. Nancy comes in, we chat. No, she doesn't have an agent. And then the next day I get an offer sent in by Beth, who's never been in the house. And then I want to call Beth and say, hey, I'm confused. You know, what's going on here? So you might want to go into a little more dialogue if they haven't signed a buyer broker agreement. But in the end, understand that it is up to you to be the professional in the transaction.
Yeah.
And just back off and let the seller get the house sold and move on. Nancy?
We have a card that we printed up, looks like a business card. It's called the open house card. And it identifies that they're working with us, and they give it to builders, builders reps and open houses. And in an addition, I tell my buyer agents, sign my name. When you sign in at the open house, don't sign your name, sign my name. The benefit to them is usually the agent on duty will ignore them. And number two, is this written in that they obviously have a relationship. So you have to educate your buyer client, if you're going to have them sign this form, you educate them on what to do if they find a house that's not listed. What do they do at a broker open house? What do they do at a builder's meeting? So we give them this card, so they can carry it around and instruct them on what to say. So you don't leave that to them to remember what to do. You tell them how to handle the program.
Is it possible for you to send us a copy to be put in the forms that they'll receive tomorrow?
Yes.
All right. So years ago, the Star Group, and I'm going to do 2 plugs here right now, if y'all will allow me to, and whether or not you do, I have the microphone. So 2 things. This is one of the major benefits of belonging to Women's Council, especially Women's Council of Florida, because we have had terrific educational events this year. We've had over 300 people sign up for all of our events in person. We've had terrific panels and lots of great information. So if nothing else, this type of education more than pays for your dues. So I'm going to invite you, if you're a member, to re-up, if you're not a member, to join. Secondly, I want to talk about Star Power very quickly. Star Power is a group of, now I guess we're 300 plus top agents from around the United States and Canada, who a group was started by the former president of Certified Residential Specialist, CRS, which is now RRC, Howard Brenton, many years ago. And his idea was to bring together people who were top producers who were willing to share, like the ladies on this panel who are Star Power stars, willing to share what they learn with other agents. So we are like a huge top producer mastermind group. And we all get together, and there's a conference every year. And this year we have a conference in Beth, help me, Nashville, the February 29th.
No,
And
no,
the start is
July.
in July.
July, that's CRS. Thank you, ladies. See, I can't keep it straight. Too many conferences. Any rate, all of these ladies will be presenting as I will be. And there's, you know, we invite you to look that up online at crs.com and join us for that. But what I want to bring up is many years ago, we came up with this idea that Nancy's talking about, and we called it a passport. And I just got away from using it when we went to Transaction Broker in Florida years ago. But that is a fabulous idea. It works very well. And it also helps educate your buyer or the buyer when they come in on the open house as to how things should work. When you go, if you go to a builder's site, give them my card, give them this passport. So that's kind of what you're still using, Nancy?
Yeah, well, yep, we call it open house card. I don't remember the password, but you know what? I probably somewhere in the depths of my mind remembered the passport, but it works great. You can't pin a note like kindergarten that they, you know, like which bus number on their shirt. So if you give it to them and you talk about it and you talk about the circumstances when they should use it, they'll remember. And the other one is that they like to be able to go to an open house and not have anybody ask them questions. So if they write my name down, generally speaking, the agent there leaves them alone.
The Oh, I don't mean to cut you off, Nancy. I was going to say the other thing is when you tell the buyer to sign in your name, you can also say, in that way, that agent won't bug you, right?
Yeah.
Because if you put your name and email or phone number, they're going to spam you sometimes, right? They're going to bug me, not you. So make sure you put my name down.
That's what, sorry, I didn't say it as clearly. Thank you, Beth. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's great.
Another
language. So-
benefit.
I have
So-
another point to make on open house, and that is just from being professional and friendly in your marketplace. When I'm at open house and people come in and I ask, you know, are you working with another agent? Oh yeah, we're working with Beth Jaworski. You know what? I have the most respect for Beth. You could not be in better hands. And I honestly, my face just lights up because I really mean it. You know, because at the end of the day, let's say that, you know, the agent that they're working with maybe not as, you know, experienced. Oftentimes, and I know all of us on this, you know, on this panel have been in this situation, we're often coaching the buyer's agent on our listings, you know, and we want to have that really good rapport with them right off the bat. So, you know, and we answer every call that the agents, you know, give us. We just really sing their praises because, you know, it's not as easy as Beth said to get things done anymore. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I think that is great, Dawn, because yes, we all do that. In addition, I will pick up the phone in between people coming in the open house. And I would call Beth and say, yo, Beth, I just want to let you know, I'm standing out here at 123 Elm Street, and a couple of your folks just came through. And so you might want to text them and ask them how things are going, because they were in this open house and they really acted like they liked it. So now Beth is thrilled to death because I gave her a heads up that they're in the street. And they feel so much better about Beth because I'm saying what a great agent she is. And it elevates me in the eyes of that buyer and to anybody else who happens to be in the house at the time that I'm saying another agent is a good agent. So it just only adds to your stature, your integrity, and your honesty to do things like that. Because, you know, folks, when the dust clears and that transaction has closed, we're still have to work together. We all still have to work together. We're one big family, just like, you know, going to Thanksgiving dinner and you're like, oh my God, I have to go there. And, you know, Uncle Willie's going to tell some of those crazy stories again. And I have to hear whatever. We all have dysfunction in our family. And in our real estate family, we definitely have dysfunction, but we all have to learn how to work together to make those things happen. And it doesn't help you one bit to gain a terrible reputation in your area as the agent who will steal somebody else's client, who will badmouth them or do things like that. And we can't spend our whole life filing a code of ethics complaint against somebody. So the best thing you can do is treat everybody like you'd like to be treated. You know, that's the platinum rule. You know, treat them like they'd like to be treated, like you'd like to be treated, and be kind and be nice to the people, regardless of who it happens to be. All right, so we're about 10 minutes before we have to wrap up this session. And I just want to, one thing here, Maria Elena D'Amico said, question, lenders only allow so much in concessions, 3% to 6%. Until they change their rules, asking for payment in the contract may not be feasible. That is true. However, we have a lot of buyers that aren't asking the seller for concessions. What would you ladies say real quick?
That's true. Yeah. If they don't have the capacity, you have to find another answer, which is why when you start, you discuss what their capacity is, and you know you can't. If they have to have closing costs, the maximum closing costs, then you know that they're going to have another way to pay you, which might be dad or whatever. If they don't have any capacity to pay you, you have to decide if you want to work with them.
Okay, anybody else?
I think that sums it up pretty much. You know, the good news is we have not seen a market, at least in our area, where buyers are asking for closing costs. So that so far hasn't been an issue, but if it comes to that, yes, you got to get creative and figure out How else? And as Nancy said, circles right back to the importance of having that first meeting.
What, nothing stops you that I'm aware of, at least here in Florida, and I'm not going to speak to that being correct. What if you loan them the money for the compensation and they pay you back with some interest over a period of, year or 2 years time? There's nothing that I think precludes you from creating a loan. Now, having said that, speak to your brokers and speak to your lawyers about that. But if we can hold mortgages, why can't we just do a consumer loan? I don't think there's.
Yeah, it's not something that usually comes up. Usually everybody, it's not a question. It's a question we're thinking about in our discussion, but Beth, Dawn, answer, I don't have this issue and haven't for 25 years. It's
So we
not,
probably won't.
yeah,
Mhm.
probably won't. I mean,
So
you may
one
have, but
One other question before we do the wrap up. What if the other agent is a real jackwagon?
Mhm.
Then I commented that likely the buyers or the clients are as well, like attracts like. You
And
dodged the
so,
bullet.
right. And so you don't say they're a great agent, but when they say, hey, I'm working with this jackwagon, you say, oh, okay, that sounds great.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just leave it at that. You don't need to pay a false compliment.
Right.
Or-
Yeah, never be inauthentic.
Or truthfully, if you don't know the jackwagon, you just say, oh, haven't heard of that agent before, but good. Or if you know the jackwagon is a jackwagon, say, oh, well, I'm pleased to say I haven't had any transactions with them, so we'll see how it goes.
one of the things, one of the
Because you just heard that they're a jackwagon.
One of the things is a real problem and that we have mostly overcome, unless you go out into the rural Vermont, is the listing agent who doesn't understand buyer brokering and becomes all of these objections. And you have to educate the other realtor. And if you start that in the very beginning, if that realtor, the jackwagon, is representing the house that you're trying to get your buyer into, you have to educate very gently and make it understandable and make them feel okay about it in order to continue to get your buyer what they're looking for. Because the biggest problem is not the consumer, it's the other realtor.
I don't know. I disagree with it. It's not, it can be the client every now and then.
Yeah, but often in our world, in the beginning, it took a learning curve to get the other side understanding that this is not a challenge to them or their money or their seller. And so it took some negotiating and explaining.
So again, I want to thank you ladies. I want to thank everybody in attendance. I want to give a shout out to a couple of people I just saw in the chat that are on here. And again, I'm not surprised. We have Cindy Hayden from Florida, who is the current chair of the insurance committee for 2023 for NAR and a huge Women's Council member and advocate, past president of Tampa, I believe, on here. We had Debbie Zalewski, who absolutely doesn't need to be here either, but is here. Debbie served on our board for Women's Council of Realtors Florida last year. We have Beata Wanderer, who also served on the board this year. And, I just can't name all the people that, I see here that have posted things in the chat. To answer your question, Nancy's going to send her passport information to us. And within 24 hours, you will have a link to all the documents that the panelists have sent, as well as to the recording for this. I want to ask you to promote Women's Council, join Women's Council, get involved with us. We have lots of room on committees at your local level as well as state and national, and promote education. I want you to join us for the Star Power Conference. I want you to join us for the CRS conference and meet these people. The other benefit of Women's Council is the networking and the referrals you receive. So if you have referrals going to areas where Dawn, Beth, and Nancy work, I want you to make a commitment that you're going to send referrals to them because they are absolutely excellent. I want to thank you all. I can't thank you enough. And for the audience, this is really going to cost me. You have no idea. For these ladies to take their time and come on. They've been friends of mine for over 30 years. And I really dearly love them and appreciate them and admire them for their expertise. So I want each of you to give me a minute to wrap up. So I'm going to start with Nancy, since your beautiful face is on the screen.
Well, I thank you all for having us. It's been fun chatting with everybody and thinking back to the beginning of buyer brokering. And I think that as you embrace it, you'll discover how freeing it really is, and that you no longer have to worry about whether or not you're going to get paid.
All right. I forgot to do this. So would each of the speakers here put your name and your contact information in the chat? So Beth, give me some final thoughts.
Well, there was just one thing that we did not touch on, and that was the term of the buyer agreement. I know when buyer agency became popular in our area, people were thinking, oh, it's the flip side of a listing contract. You know, it's the employment for the buyer. So they were putting 180 days or 6 months in there. And keep in mind that that's an obligation to you also, and you might not want to work with these people for 6 months. So that is just one point we have not touched on, but I would like everybody who's going to start doing buyer brokerage, who hasn't, to think about, and don't be afraid to put a shorter term in there, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, you know, whatever. You can always extend it. And as Nancy said, I think once you start doing buyer brokerage, if you haven't before, you will find out that it is a much better way to do, to represent the buyer, to help a buyer find a home, because you are representing them and they're going to be a lot happier with you, and you're going to be a lot happier because you know you get paid.
Thank you very much. Dawn?
It is a game changer. You know, our area has had a wide variety of apples being offered on the cooperating broker compensation in the MLS for years. So we did it out of necessity. And a lot of people I know, you know, they tell me, oh, our state is 3 apples, our state is this apples, whatever. I'm like, it's coming. As people are moving across the United States, going back and forth, you know, it will come to your area if it's not yet. And as Beth said, it's such a, you know, sense of relief because you know you will get paid. One thing I wanted to mention really quickly is I've seen some people ask questions that have not been brought up in the chat. That, oh, can we write our own documents? Please don't. Please go to your broker, you know, have them go to the board, have it done legally by whomever is in charge of that for your board, because we don't want to get you guys in trouble. Stay in your lane. We're realtors. We do great jobs at selling homes and representing our clients, but we do not do legal contracts.
No, and I answered. Thank you for bringing that up, Dawn. I answered that for whomever posed that and said, you know, go to your broker. Don't do anything like that until you talk to your broker. And of course, if you are the broker, then you can naturally do something like that. But just don't go out and willy-nilly create something that's going to cause you an issue. You've got to have broker permission. So I want to end by saying I hope this time was valuable to all of you. It certainly was to me, and I've been in business 45 years. I can't thank my committee enough, our 2023 Women's Council of Florida Education Committee for this Learn More, Earn More series. We couldn't have done it without all of you. You've worked so hard to make sure that we have great programming for our members, especially Catherine, who has served as the vice chair and has had to put up with my wacko thoughts and ideas all year. And to our techie, Correa, who is Correa Young out of Jacksonville, who is a new up and coming rising star. And so again, I can't thank all of you enough. Thank you to Charmaine, President Charmaine for 2023 and her board, and President Denora for 2024 in her board for all that you have given us the latitude to do. We are at time. I thank you all. Check back in 24 hours to get links to everything. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Women's Council of Realtors. It was wonderful.
Thank you. It was great. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.